Hello, hello. I'm Zachary Hines, and this is what you missed at the Straz. Hello, I'm Zachary Hines, and I am with the bewitching Leanne Day Douglas.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Are you?
I am. No, I am good. Sleepy. I'm a little sleepy this morning.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful day. I had my waffles. I danced to Kylie Minogue's entire discography. I've had a very productive morning.
Not me.
We are talking about Into the Woods. Leanne has never seen my favorite musical,
So I had never seen it until yesterday, and then I saw it twice.
which I'm guessing means that you liked it.
I wanted to compare the Broadway version to the film.
Right, because there's a filmed version of the original Broadway production from it premiered in 1987. They filmed it in, I think, 89.
89.
And uh that was my first introduction to Into the Woods, and my little gay boy dreams came true. Oh my goodness, it was so good. And then I went on to see, I remember Vanessa Williams was in the revival on Broadway in 2002. And I just remember I avoided it for a while, and my best friend, she was like, "You need to see it. You can't be a musical theater kid and not see Into the Woods with Bernadette Peters." So that is my history with Into the Woods. So you watched the original Broadway production first.
Correct. So the original Broadway production that was filmed in 1989 had Bernadette Peters. For those who don't know, she was nominated for multiple Tonys. She got the Tony for Annie Get Your Gun and for Song and Dance. But
Wait a second. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't know who Bernadette Peters is,
hey, we're trying to get new audiences here.
unsubscribe. Go home, turn it off.
You're terrible.
It's true.
She was also in Gypsy. She was in Hello Dolly, and she has film and TV credits out the wazoo. So that's Bernadette Peters. And then it also starred Joanna Gleason as the baker's wife, and she won the Tony Award for Best Actress for Into the Woods in 1988. So
Mhm.
she got the Tony for this role. And but she was also in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which she got a Tony nomination for that. And she also has film and TV credits, just like crazy.
And her voice is like butter.
Oh, her voice is amazing. And I was kind of like looking at her thinking, wow, she looks really familiar. And she was in the film Sex and the City. She was in The Wedding Planner on TV. She was in ER. She was in Murphy Brown. She was in Friends. And so she's kind of been all over the place. So for anyone who doesn't know who Joanna Gleason is by name, look her up on Google. You'll know her by face. She's got to really recognize she's been in so much stuff. So, and she was fabulous.
Oh yeah, I just could listen to her sing all day long.
Oh, I felt like she stole the show. I mean, she really did. I can see why she got a Tony for that performance.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would argue that the baker's wife is the protagonist of.
I agree with that.
Well,
No, I do agree with that.
actually, I don't know, because the baker really changes the most. I don't know. I could argue with myself back and forth.
Well, but we should tell people what it's about in case they haven't seen it.
Well, and let's just go back, because you were talking about the Tonys, and I think it's really interesting because it is my favorite musical, and justice for Into the Woods, because, and I know you love Phantom, but Into the Woods and Phantom of the Opera came out the same year.
Yes, they did.
And Phantom won Best Musical, which I highly disagree.
Ah,
I'm on record. Into the Woods was robbed. But interestingly enough, Into the Woods won Best Score and Best Book
mm-hmm.
over Phantom of the Opera, which I think is interesting that the music of Into the Woods beat out Phantom of the Opera.
Mm-hmm. I can agree with that. Absolutely.
I mean, the score is
It
gorgeous.
really is. It really is. I really liked the music a lot. It was really interesting to listen to. The lyrics were really clever, really funny.
While our
Um,
withers wither with her. It's so just so smart, all the different and there's, like, rapping too, and, like,
oh,
the
yeah.
witch,
So,
and she's like, "Greens, greens, nothing but greens, radishes, and rutabagas."
yeah, it was fantastic. So yeah, I really, really liked it. And then opposite for the film, you've got an all-star cast. It was Anna Kendrick, Chris Pine, Johnny Depp, Meryl Streep, James Corden, Christine Baranski, Tracy Ullman, and the list just kept going on and on. And so that's who you had in the film. But the story is basically you've got Little Red Riding Hood, Jack of the Beanstalk, Cinderella, and Rapunzel, and their stories all intersect through the baker and his wife. They have this curse that's been put upon them by the witch, and
Because of his father.
because of his father, because his father stole the witch's greens. That's where the witch's rap comes from, and the witch's beans, her magic beans. And so the witch sends them on this quest to get what are the things?
A cow as white as milk.
A cape as red as blood, hair as yellow as corn, a slipper as pure as gold.
Very good.
And and so the quest is what kind of brings the baker and his wife in the solar system of all of these other fairy tale characters.
Right, because everyone's going into the woods. They have, Cinderella's running through the woods to go to the festival to meet the prince, and then she's running away from him every night. Little Red is going into the woods to bring her grandmother some goodies.
The grandmother's house.
And Rapunzel is locked in a tower in the wood. So they all and Jack is going into the woods to sell
The cow.
beloved friend, the cow Milky White, so that they can get by.
Yeah. Yeah. So so that's kind of the story in a nutshell. Um
But they they're all going to this quest, and they all want something. They're all wishing. It starts everyone's wishing for something. You know,
right.
Cinderella's in a horrible situation with her stepmom and stepsisters, and she's wishing to meet the prince and fall in love, and Rapunzel is wishing for her freedom, and the baker's wife and the baker are wishing for a child. And so by the end of the first act, they all kind of get their wish.
Yeah, I found it interesting because the end of the first act I thought was the end of the play. And then I was like, "Oh no, that's just intermission. So what's going to happen now?"
Right. Interestingly enough, Into the Woods has a junior edition. If you see it produced in many high school, oftentimes they will only do the first act.
That makes sense.
But it's not good with just the first act. The second act is what makes it, because it's really the second act is all about the fallout from all of the kind of unintended consequences. Yeah. You
Yeah,
know, they sometimes, you know, you get your wish, but there's another beanstalk growing that you didn't pay attention to.
that's right.
And you have to kind of confront all the people that you screwed over to get your wish or
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, so it's interesting because you have to also take a look at when the musical was produced and created. It was written at the end of late 80s,
Mhm.
um, in the midst of the AIDS crisis. And, you know, while it wasn't directly written to be specifically about that, you can't deny that it wasn't influenced by it. In the end, spoiler alert, everyone dies pretty much at the end. Um, but it's kind of like just a giant comes and wipes out half the cast.
Mhm.
And it's undiscerning as to who good people, bad people, get in the way of the giant and lose their lives. And so it's kind of just how everyone gets their wish, but then life kind of takes a turn and kind of these unexpected tragedies can happen,
Yeah,
and how you kind of cope with it.
yeah.
So it's very interesting, and it's very interesting watching it now. I feel like it is very relevant to kind of this whole pandemic situation. because it's, you're on one track and then suddenly, the giant, the pandemic kind of comes out of the sky and totally.
Messed up the whole forest. Yeah, that giant messed up that forest. The woods were just like trampled. Trees were knocked in half. It was just people couldn't find their way around in there anymore because
Mhm.
everything was just destroyed.
Well, that's what I love because I love, the whole first act there or first half, they're going through the woods and they're very, finding their way. And then when they're drawn back into the woods and suddenly nothing is recognizable
Yeah,
and they all lose their way and they have to kind of forge a new path.
yeah.
So that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in.
Mhm. Yep, but watching the movie was much more interesting
Yeah.
than our current situation here at home.
But it was also hopeful because, you form your own kind of allies and your own, when they were singing "No One Is Alone," I thought that was so beautiful. And they kind of forged their own family, to move on together.
Yeah. So the differences between the movie and the Broadway play were kind of interesting. I watched the Broadway play and it was a really poor quality video
Well, it was from the
from the 80s.
'80s.
So it was on YouTube. And so the video quality was bad. And I had to like put myself back in the 80s and into Broadway in the 80s. And so the costumes weren't the best. Um, the scenery wasn't the best. The effects were not the best. And so it was kind of like, wow, this is a little bit corny, but the acting was really phenomenal. The voices were really, really good. Um, so I kind of had to put aside my dislike of the wigs and the costumes and everything else and just enjoy the story. Whereas when you're watching the movie, which was done in 2014, obviously it's like 20 years later, you can do a lot more with effects and costumes and makeup and all of that to get the point across. So it was really interesting watching the two of them back to back. And then I did that yesterday. And then this morning, I went back and watched my favorite song from the movie done by Bernadette Peters to kind of compare the two in my mind. Because I was like, who did this better? Was it Meryl Streep or Bernadette Peters that did this song better? And I have an opinion about it, and I want to see if you have an opinion about it. You've seen both, right?
Of course.
Okay. So, Last Midnight.
Mhm.
It's the last midnight. That one.
Mhm.
Um, I thought Meryl Streep did it better than Bernadette Peters. And the reason I say that, and maybe this is just a me not being able to hear them properly in the video from 1989, was it didn't have subtitles, and I did have the subtitles on with the movie, and so I was able to understand it a little better and follow it a little better, and so I was able to appreciate the lyrics of that song better. And I did not get it in the Broadway play that the witch died. Like when Bernadette Peter kind of melts into the floor, I thought she just did a magic trick and was disappearing. I
Mhm.
didn't know she was dying. Where in the movie, she's like being sucked down into a tar pit, but they've got this wind effect and her cape is blowing around and she was just amazing. And then I went back and watched Bernadette Peters, and she's holding her cape up and dancing around the stage to kind of make the cape go up in the air, and it just seemed kind of hokey after the fact. So I was like, I'm sure 25, 30 years ago, that was really, really good. But you get to 2014 when you can do those effects and have all the smoke and everything and have
Mhm.
Meryl Streep just disappear. I just really enjoyed the movie version much more.
Yeah, I think, it's obviously, I think it helps. It's a big epic fantasy, so to have the budget to kind of make all those effects happen definitely adds to it, especially for the witch who has all these magical powers. It's interesting they changed the delivery of Last Midnight from the original to it actually changed I believe in the London production. And then they kind of kept that in future revivals. That Last Midnight went from kind of an FU to everyone. You know, the witch is kind of over everyone. And she's just like, I'd rather be dead than be around you people.
Yeah.
Um, and in the movie and in future revivals after the original production, it was more of like a kind of haunting, eerie final lullaby for the baby,
Mhm.
that she's singing to. And I love the character of the witch. I
Yeah.
think it's very, I like, there's a lot of talk about being nice doesn't mean you're good.
Yes, and she sings that. She sings that in one of her
She
songs.
doesn't wanna be good or nice, she's right. That's all
Right.
that matters to her. She's like, "I don't, if I have to find this boy and sacrifice him to the giant to save everyone, that's what I'm gonna have to do." Like, she kind of got all of this. What I love so much about the show itself is that it kind of takes these fairy tales that are very black and white and then adds all of these complications and gray areas that, you know, things aren't always clear. And, like Cinderella meeting Prince Charming, like she on the steps of the palace is one of my favorite songs because you think like, oh my God, of course she's gonna wanna like fall in love with the prince. But she's having this whole moment where she's like, what if he finds out that I'm a peasant? Like, I don't belong in this world. Like,
Right.
of course, and she's unhappy in her home too. So, but there's this like, sometimes when you get what you want or think you want, you realize it's not exactly that easy.
And there was a lot of humor in it as well because there's like she runs away from him the first night. So the second night he spreads pitch on the stairs so that she
Right.
literally gets stuck. So instead of her just, running down the stairs and losing a shoe, I mean, she is like literally stuck in the pitch and has to step out of her shoes, out of the pitch to get away from him, and she manages, to take one shoe with her and leaves the other behind to see what he'll do.
Hmm.
And then he does come after her to try to find her.
Right. And then even things like I love Little Red's story where she's kind of stalked by the wolf who is this like bad boy who has his eyes on her. And after she's rescued, she kind of what's the line at the end where she says, "Isn't it nice to know a lot and a little not?" Which I love that line. I love that it's, as you grow, because so much of this is about growing up and coming of age and kind of the complexities that just keep growing as you grow. Things don't become as black and white. There is so much more gray area. And
What did you think about the Prince's duet?
I love Agony. Yeah.
Okay, so I loved that. I thought that was so fun.
Yeah, it's
They
mhm.
cut it from the movie, the second one, the
The
reprise.
second one, yeah. Well, they
Yeah.
kept so it's very interesting because the movie's produced by Disney,
Mhm.
which has taken all of it's kind of done the opposite of what Into the Woods does. Their business model is based on these fairy tales and the whole like happily ever afterness of
Right.
this. So it's interesting that they produced this and they did keep it pretty much intact, other than Rapunzel gets to live in this and have somewhat of a happily ever after with her prince. But in the musical, the princes both cheat on Cinderella and Rapunzel with Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. And they
Right.
kind of always want what they can't have. And that's what drew them to Cinderella and Rapunzel, because Rapunzel was locked up in a tower and Cinderella was running away from him every night. And so when they finally get them, then they're kind of on to the next conquest. And I love when Prince Charming says, uh, "I was raised to be charming, not
Not
sincere."
sincere. Yeah, it's just like one of the best lines in the entire show. So,
Hmm.
I just loved it. And it's funny because it was really, really funny. Like the delivery or maybe the direction in the Broadway play was much more humorous than the movie.
Yeah. Well, I feel like they got to be a little more adult and poke fun at things more than maybe Disney would allow.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I even the movie though still is very funny. And it's funny because it's real. It's interesting that he took all of these fairy tales and made them closer to what real life is like. How often we find ourselves in the woods, and you have to go into the woods to get what you want. Um and it's kind of these complexities of life where even Jack, when he finds out that his mom was killed when the prince's guard or whatever pushed his mom out of the way of the giant, and she inadvertently died, and he's like, I need to seek revenge, and the baker said, no, it's a little more complicated than that. It's
Mhm.
there are unintended consequences, and there is so much gray area to things that um I thought that was such an interesting way to tell that story.
Yeah, because when they're going to kill the giantess, Little Red Riding Hood says, "But this is wrong. My mother and grandmother would not be proud of me because the giantess is a person. Isn't there room for forgiveness?" And so, yeah, there were a lot of moments like that in
Hmm.
the show.
And that's why, like, I love where the witch is Rapunzel's adopted mother, and is the one who's keeping her locked in the tower because she knows how horrible and scary the world can be. Um, which that's when she sings "Stay with Me" to Rapunzel. Oh, like it's so like you feel bad for some of these characters, but then you're also like, oh, but why are you doing that, or like why are you making that decision? But you can kind of understand, like you can understand why the witch was locking her child that she loves so much away from the world, because she wanted to protect the child, and she knew
Right.
what dangers she should encounter. But I guess the point is you have to go through it to that's just the journey of life.
Yeah. So, do you want to rate it?
I give it well, I already said Into the Woods is my favorite. So I'll give it 5 out of 5 magical beans.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Oh my gosh, you read my mind. So, yes, 5 out of 5 magic beans. Absolutely.
So good. Oh, I'm glad I found well, you liked Sweeney Todd too.
I did like Sweeney Todd.
What did you like better?
Oh, that's hard. I
I know.
really liked Sweeney Todd because it was dark and funny. It was really, really funny. But this was also really funny. At least the Broadway play was. I didn't find the film that funny, but the Broadway play, I was laughing the whole time. So like I said, it's either the delivery or the direction, or I just don't know if it just lended itself more to that. The Disney film was darker. Um, Oh, which do I like better? I think I liked Sweeney Todd better, even though it's all Grizzly, and I don't like Grizzly
Mm.
that much. But I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. This was really good. I liked the music a lot. Like I said, it was really clever, and I appreciated it more watching the film with the subtitles because there are a lot of little Sondheim plays with words a lot, and and it's very quick. So
Mhm.
if you miss it, you miss it. You miss the joke, you miss everything. So to be able to watch it with the subtitles and catch every single word of Sondheim's was really useful to me to be able to truly appreciate how clever this musical is. So I highly recommend, yeah, I mean, just watch both, you know, watch both, decide for yourself. The one on YouTube is free. So I rented the film on Amazon Prime. So, you know, it was worth it. It was worth the $4.
Oh
So,
yeah, just for Meryl alone, and Emily Blunt as the baker. I love the role of the baker's wife. The moment in the woods, where she strays with the prince. I think when she's talking about life can't be a series of moments, otherwise you wouldn't be able to appreciate the moments. And I love all the ambiguity. All the characters have so much ambiguity to them. You know, no one's perfect. Everyone has very evident flaws, but they all come together to help each other out. And I love in the end when they're singing "No One Is Alone," you know, they have the line where someone is on your side, someone else is not. While we're seeing our side, maybe we forgot that no one is alone. And so we always have people to be on our side, to join together with. And I think that's important to remember as we're alone
In our
in
homes.
our homes.
Yeah. So what did you want to watch next time?
Do you wanna just watch Into the Woods again? Um, I don't know, TBD, TBD.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
We will, yes. It'll be a nice little surprise for the listeners.
Yes, it'll be a surprise.
All right, well, until then, until next week, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you later.